Good afternoon, Rotarians. I have the honor of pinch hitting for President Kevin today. At this time, I would like to ask a member of the Peace Committee to come to the podium to deliver a reflection and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. You are that person. Very good.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to briefly tell you guys, I'm sure you heard me talking about it leading up to last weekend, but the Peace Summit for District 6600 was this past Saturday. And we had over 200 attendees and 70 Rotarians come, and it was a great day to reflect on how each of the clubs and organizations in Northwest Ohio and the surrounding areas can all foster peace and what they can do. So I just wanted to tell anyone that attended, thank you so much, and we look forward to next year. When the noise of life becomes overwhelming, grant me the serenity to embrace peace. Help me to find tranquility in the quiet moments and to cherish the stillness. May I cultivate harmony within myself, balancing my thoughts and emotions. Let this inner harmony reflect in my actions and interactions with others. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. As we begin our meeting, I would like to thank and acknowledge DMC Technology and Rotarian Pat for sponsoring our meeting today. Thank you very much. Is Pat here? Where's Pat? Does anyone have any guests? We would like you, the microphone is on the stage back there. Bring your guests with you. And I have a new ad that Kevin put on here. Kevin says, we are asking that members introduce the guest with name, company, and role only. Guests, we are excited to have you here, but please leave speaking to your Rotary host.
Father Ron, I have with me today Rachel Gagnon. Rachel, just not that long ago, but is part of joined the team at Cherry Street Ministries, and she is the president of the organization.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians and guests. Today I have with me two friends of mine. First is my friend Jeff McClendon, who's a sergeant with Toledo Police, so part of Toledo's finest, so thank you, Jeff, for being here. And then my friend Tashina Hogue, who's the founder and owner of Tangible Habits. She is a board-certified behavioral analyst, so welcome them both.
Welcome.
Hello, fellow Rotarians and guests. Today I have a friend of mine, Jennifer Moralski. She is the HR representative for Global Tech College.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to introduce Will Garby. Will Garby is our Alumni Engagement Officer at St. Francis de Sales School, and we also wanted to have a cheering crowd here for Father Ron.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I have two guests with me today. First, I have Sophia Fisher, who is the lead business development person at WGTE Public Media. And I'm sure many of you will recognize my other guest, Dr. Dion Somerville, who is president of Owens Community College.
Welcome.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. My guest is Carl Wagner, Executive Director of Historic South Initiative.
Welcome, Carl.
Thanks, Phil.
So good to see you up there, Father. Thanks for doing that. I have two guests today. One, ladies first. Renee Clark is a nurse and on the campaign committee for Torres for Toledo. And then Roberto Torres, who's back in Toledo, worked recently with on the cabinet for the Mayor Duggan of Detroit. and is looking to become mayor of Toledo. So those are my guests today.
Welcome to Rotary.
Thank you. Hello, Rotarians and friends. We have two guests today. One is Jason Selgo. He's the superintendent for Archbold City Schools. Let's give him a round. Woo. And then we also have Jenny Gilroy. She is with Farmers and Merchants.
Welcome.
Welcome to them.
Father Ron and fellow Rotarians, my guest today is Mike Moore. Mike is not only the co-founder of Traumatic Brain Injury Resource Center, but he's a graduate of the St. Francis High School.
Welcome. We have a lot of visitors today. I'm sure it's not because I'm standing in for Kevin. I think it's because of our speaker. We're happy that recently we welcomed 9 new members into our Rotary Club during the month of January. They are Alicia Lawson, Ash Lemons, Carrie Miller, Aaron Baker, Greg Cook, Hope Luther, Jenny Vancil, Jen Kurtovic, and Nick Vargas. So we have 9 new members in January. That's wonderful. Welcome as new members to Rotary. And we also welcomed 2 new corporate members. They are the Ability Center and the University of Toledo Federal Credit Union. Thank you and welcome to being members of Rotary. So the program now says President's Remarks, but I've got no remarks other than to say I'm pinch hitting for Kevin. So our speaker today, as we all know, is Frank LaRose, Secretary of State. He's been Secretary of State since 2019. His CV includes United States Army Reservist, Ohio State Senator, United States Army Special Forces Green Beret, and Eagle Scout. He received the Legislator of the Year award from the Ohio Association of Election Officials for his efforts to improve Ohio's election process. He and his wife, Lauren, have 3 children. As Secretary of State, he is the Chief Elections Officer in Ohio. His office also grants authority to do business in Ohio, and his office is responsible for records, certification, and filing. I understand a passion of his is transparency in government. Please remember that after he speaks, questions are supposed to be questions, not commentaries. And please welcome Ohio Secretary of State, Frank LaRose.
Well, thank you, Father. I appreciate that. And glad to see such a big crowd. I guess the word didn't get out about who the speaker was this afternoon, but it's great to be with the Rotary. I should say I am a lapsed Rotarian. I was a member of the Akron Rotary Club, and then when I started serving in the state Senate and had to spend 4 days a week or so down in Columbus, I started missing too many meetings. But one of the things that I always cherish about speaking with the Rotary Club is the four-way test, which, if you think about it, we spend a lot of time passing state laws and interpreting those through the court system, but we could really get rid of tens of thousands of pages of all of that if we all, just 12 million of us, agreed to live by the four-way test. You really wouldn't need much more than that. Of course, that's not realistic. It's not the way things work, but it's good to be with a group of people that have that set of common values, because it is a good guide, a good north arrow in sort of your daily conduct, in your personal life and in your professional life. Really, what I want to talk to you about today is my work as the Ohio Secretary of State, what we do at the Secretary of State's office. Now, you know that the end result of all of these elections and that work is of course, the people that get sworn into office and then conduct the work of our communities, our state, and our nation. But I want to talk to you about the process of running elections and the other side of this office, where I serve as the front door for all new businesses. We are the place where new businesses are formed. Now, I think a few years ago, people didn't really know that we had a Secretary of State, or if you were to ask the average person on the street, what does the Ohio Secretary of State do? They would have told you, I don't know, negotiates peace with Michigan? Now, as a proud Buckeye, I would never do that, but I can promise you that's not what the Ohio Constitution gives me as a responsibility. But again, it is two things. We help people start businesses, and we help people vote. That's the simplest way to think of this office. I'm going to start with the business side. Many of you are entrepreneurs, small business owners. We're that front door for the American dream of starting and growing a business. And so when somebody wants to become an LLC or an S-Corp or a corporation or even a nonprofit, they get their articles of incorporation from the Ohio Secretary of State's office. I'm proud to say that we've set the lowest fee of any state in the Midwest. It's $99 to start your business. And by the way, I don't need to tell you all this, the cost of everything in life has gone up, but we've been able to hold steady at that $99 filing fee for the entire 6 years that I've held this job. But not only do we charge the lowest fee, but we're also one of the quickest in the country. We can generally get you back those articles of incorporation within 24 hours. In fact, people are often surprised when they hit send at maybe 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and first thing the next morning, it's already sitting there in their inbox ready to go. Our team takes a lot of pride in turning those articles of incorporation quickly. We've also taken on the responsibility. I've intentionally worked to be an advocate for small business. There's nothing small about small business. Close to 50% of Ohioans work for a small business. So as much as we're always excited to bring that big new factory or big new headquarters to Ohio, it's small business that's really the backbone of our state's economy. And so we try to make Ohio a very pro-business environment. We know there's nothing easy about running a business, but we want to make sure that we at least can get the government out of the way so that you can do what you do best, and that's grow your enterprise and put people to work and create value and maybe build something that you can pass on to the next generation. In that sense, really build generational wealth within a family. It is truly the American dream, and it's something that we're proud that we play a role in helping people start their businesses. I'm also happy to say that we've broken the record nearly every year during the 6 years I've been in this office. We've had hundreds of thousands of new businesses created, and we've set the all-time record several of those years for the number of new businesses. I think 2025 can be another one of those years where we break the all-time record for new business formations, and that would certainly be good news for Ohio. Now, to the extent that you think about the Secretary of State's office, and you probably don't very often, that would be, you probably think about the role that I have as Ohio's Chief Elections Officer. So I'm going to spend most of my time talking about that, and I do hope that you have questions, because this should be a dialogue. I want to make sure to do my part to inform Ohioans about how does this whole election thing really work, because, well, it's not a news flash that there's a lot of false information out there about elections, right? We've got a technical term for this. We call it BS. There's a lot of BS out there that people spread around on social media and make YouTube videos about and forward emails along to their friends and that kind of thing. So what I want to do is just describe to you how can I say with confidence that we make it both easy to vote and hard to cheat. And I hope by the end of this that you'll share my strong conviction that Ohio does both. But let's start with this. You don't have to make a choice. Unfortunately, you will hear harsh partisan voices from both sides that will often tell you that you have to choose either convenience or security. You have to choose either making it easy to vote or making it hard to cheat, that somehow you can't have both. And that's not true. It's a false choice. You don't have to choose one or the other. You can have convenience and security. Let's start with the convenience part. Ohio unquestionably makes it convenient to vote, and we're proud of that. We're one of the leaders in the country with making it really convenient to cast a ballot. We have 4 weeks of early voting where you can go down to your county board of elections, including evening hours and weekend hours. There's only 20 states in the nation that have weekend early voting. We're one of them. There's only 5 states in the nation that have Sunday early voting. We're one of those. Well over 200 hours of early voting. You go in, you show your ID, you cast your ballot, you walk out with a free sticker. It's going to be a great process if you decide to participate in early voting. If you don't want to do that, you can do what's called absentee voting from home. Anybody can cast a ballot from their own kitchen table. In fact, I was speaking to a group of college students a couple months ago, and they said, all right, LaRose, why don't you make it easier to vote? It's so inconvenient to vote. I said, all right, I've got an idea. How about we pass a bill where I will have a government employee bring you your ballot and just leave it with you. And you can do your research, you can Google your choices, talk to your friends, and a couple days later, I'll have that government employee come back and just pick up your ballot and take it to the Board of Elections. And these kids said, yeah, you should do that. Why don't we do that? Well, we do. That government employee is your U.S. postal carrier. All you have to do is request it. We will send you the ballot. And here's the beauty of it. When you vote from your own kitchen table, you're allowed to cheat on the test. Follow me. I think we can all admit that we've gotten through the first page and then down to the second, and we're judges and school board members and local tax levies, and you're wondering, gosh, I wish I'd have done more research, but you're in a hurry because there's somebody behind you in line, and you end up guessing. Well, that's not a good feeling. You want to be an informed voter. If you vote from your own kitchen table, you can flip open your laptop. You can call a friend and ask them, who are you voting for judge? I don't recognize any of these names. Call the local lawyer friend of yours and say, which one of these candidates for judge is the right one? You can take maybe 25, 30 minutes, the time it would take you to organize your sock drawer, and you can be a really informed voter. And when you seal that thing up and mail it in, you can have the confidence of knowing that you cast a really smart ballot where you actually did your research. And here's the other benefit of voting absentee. The smart campaigns will take you off their contact list once you have submitted an absentee ballot. Now, they don't know how you voted, but the Board of Elections publishes the list of who's voted and who hasn't, and so the candidates will stop sending people to knock on your door, and they will stop sending people to, stop sending letters to you, and that kind of thing. The smart campaigns will not waste money, because that stuff's expensive, contacting people that have already voted. And so if you get annoyed with all that stuff, vote at the first week of early voting or first week of absentee voting, and you're less likely to get pestered throughout the rest of the campaign season. Of course, if you don't take advantage of early voting or absentee voting, you can vote on Election Day. Ohio operates about 3,200 polling locations. Yours is probably a mile or two from your house, if that. It's staffed from 6:30 a.m. until 7:30 p.m. by your neighbors. Again, the worst case scenario is if you go during the peak times, which is like first thing in the morning or right after work or during the lunch hour. If you go during the peak times, you may have a short wait. But even with that, we work to keep those down to a minimum. You'll cast your ballot, you'll walk out with a free sticker, and you'll be able to watch those results scroll across the screen on election night. So we make it easy to vote. We have online voter registration. We have a lot of things that make it really convenient in Ohio. And by the way, it shows. We've had record-breaking turnout. Now, there are some people, for their own partisan reasons, that will say that I'm trying to suppress the vote. Well, I'll tell you, if that's my objective, I stink at it. Of course, we're not trying to suppress the vote because, if you look at the numbers that we've seen massive turnout. Ohio is leading the nation in many ways, and we've certainly been setting all-time records when it comes to voter participation. 2020 was the all-time highest ever in our state's history. 2024 missed it by just a hair, and we had the all-time record last year for early voting. And so Ohio continues to show that in a process like ours, where we make it convenient to vote, people take advantage of the process. But you know what? We also make it hard to cheat. And people want this. This is not a partisan thing. People want it to be convenient. They also want it to be secure. They want to know that their vote matters and that their vote is counted honestly and accurately, and that others are not allowed to inject sort of fraudulent votes into the system. And so here's one of the things that we do in Ohio starts with the way that elections are even organized. It is a completely bipartisan enterprise. And so you're standing here or sitting here thinking, all right, LaRose, bipartisan, Republicans and Democrats can't even agree that today's Monday. I know. But at your county board of elections and 87 other county boards of elections, it's Democrats and Republicans working together. And when you walk in there, it's hard to tell who's who. Maybe somebody will have their favorite Ronald Reagan quote on the wall, or they'll have their favorite John F. Kennedy quote on their desk or whatever else. But really, other than that, it's hard to tell who's a D and who's an R, because what they are is patriotic Ohioans that believe in making sure that every voice can be heard in an honest election. It's a completely bipartisan enterprise. 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats run each county board of elections. They work together. When there's a tie vote, I'm the one that breaks that. The staff is half Democratic and half Republican. Heck, even the building is bipartisan. You're thinking, all right, how can a building be bipartisan? If you go visit your board of elections, you'll see 2 locks on each door, or at least the doors that go into the rooms where the ballots are tabulated, that kind of thing. 2 locks on every door. You need to have the Republican key that's only maintained by the Republican staff, and you need to have the Democratic key that's maintained only by the Democratic staff to even get in the door. It's like those old submarine movies where it takes 2 keys to launch the torpedo, so one guy can't do it by himself. You got to have both parties present to even go into the building at the Board of Elections. We're very serious about this. On election night, when the polling location closes, the Democrat and Republican poll workers that ran that polling location have to load up in a car together, 2 of them together, sitting in the car, and drive all of their stuff downtown. Now, just out east of us, in the Lake Erie Islands, they transport their ballots back by boat. We have to have a Democrat and a Republican on the boat, bringing the ballots back to the mainland. We are very serious about that bipartisan chain of custody. It's something that we care about. So that's the way that the whole thing's set up. But it goes beyond that. There's a lot of conspiracies out there about voting machines. So let's talk about voting machines. First of all, if there's one thing that you walk away from here with today, I hope you know that voting machines are never connected to the internet. Not possible. It would be a violation of law if you cracked one open and soldered in a Wi-Fi card or a LAN connection. You'd be a felon, by the way. We'd put you in jail. There's no way for voting machines to connect to the internet. They do not have that capability, and they're not allowed to. They're prohibited by law, but we test them before each election to make sure that they are still secure, that they're still working the way that they were manufactured, and that they are not able to connect to the internet. We also have paper ballots in Ohio. 100% of Ohio's elections use paper ballots. Whether you bubble in a choice on like a Scantron, like from an SAT test, or whether you touch a screen and it prints off the ballot, 100% of Ohio's ballots are on dead tree, wet ink, hard copy paper. And what that means is that on election night, we get the results by scanning them through an electronic computer to tabulate them. That's why we give you those results on election night. And by the way, in Ohio, you go to bed on election night knowing those results. That's not the case in every state. We take that very seriously. Ohioans want to know those results quickly, but that's not the final word. We go back 3 weeks later and we count the hard copy paper. Democrats and Republicans sitting there together, counting them one by one, and we have to match the 2 up. So if anybody's an aviator or familiar with military or law enforcement work, we always believe in redundant systems. That's an important safety mechanism. Well, we have those same redundant systems in elections. We have the electronic tabulation and the paper tabulation. The 2 have to reconcile side by side. And I'm happy to say that when we do those post-election audits, and that's what it's called when we count the paper and compare it to the electronic result, that we've had an accuracy rate above 99%. 99.99% was the rate for the 2022 election. 99.99 was the result again last year in 2024. 99.98 was the result in the 2020 presidential election. And it's not just presidential elections. We do that audit following every election, including, by the way, there's an election in just over 100 days. Or just under 100 days, rather. And in that election, we will do the post-election audit just like we always do. Now, there's some analytical thinkers in the room, and you are probably thinking, okay, LaRose, you had a 99.98% accuracy rate. Explain that 0.02. Where does that come from? Well, I think we can say at 99.98%, that's a highly accurate election, but it's important to dig into that. So how do you get a discrepancy between the hard copy paper and the electronic result at a rate of something like 0.02%. My favorite example comes from your hometown, and I'm not picking on the Lucas County Board of Elections, but this is one that I'm familiar with. In the 2020 presidential election, they were doing the post-election audit, and they came across a ballot that had been filled out, an absentee ballot. Somebody had bubbled in their little bubbles with a pink glitter pen. Can't make this up. Sounds like something my 9-year-old would do. She would probably know better. And so, of course, on election night, when it went through the scanner, it didn't read anything. The laser reflected off the glitter. It read just a blank ballot. According to the computer, there were no votes on that ballot. Of course, when they did the hand count, they could see, here's a vote for candidate A, here's a vote for candidate B, and so then it was able to count. On very rare occasions, like on the order of 1 out of every few 100,000, 2 ballots will get stuck together. Somehow there's an alignment detector in the scanner and that won't catch it. Somehow 2 feed through the machine at the same time. Very rarely. But those are the kind of things. The pink glitter pen, mistakes that people make, that's how you end up with a 0.02 inaccuracy rate. But again, suffice it to say that Ohio runs highly accurate, highly honest elections, and something that we can be proud of. It's also important to understand that voter list maintenance is a big part of the process. This sounds boring, and you're thinking, oh my gosh, voter list maintenance, put me to sleep. I'll tell you what, the most important thing that we do on a day-to-day basis is maintaining an accurate voter registration roll. What does that mean? That means that on a monthly basis, we remove deceased voters. I'm not apologizing for that. That is the responsibility that we have working with our county board of elections. The State Department of Health aggregates a list of everybody who was deceased that month, and then we work with each county to make sure they're removed from the voter rolls. We also make sure that only American citizens are registered to vote. This is a rare form of voter fraud, but it does occur. Last year alone, I caught more than 700 non-citizens attempting to register to vote, and in some cases, actually attempting to vote, and in some of those cases, we referred them for prosecution because it is a crime for a non-citizen to attempt to cast a ballot. So we take that work very seriously, maintaining the accuracy of our voter rolls. It also includes when people move. A lot of us are highly transient, particularly in our younger years. And when people move, we work with the National Change of Address database and with other states. If somebody moves out of the state of Ohio, we work with other states to capture that data and then work to get their address up to date. Now, there's also a personal responsibility component of this. If you've been registered to vote for many, many years and you haven't looked at your registration, take a minute to just go to our website, voteohio.gov, type in your first name, type in your last name, select your county, and make sure your voter registration data is up to date. And that's something that we ask everybody to do, and it's a quick thing, takes you about 2 minutes to do, and it'll give you a good chance to make sure that everything's up to date in your voter registration rules. Now let me end with this before we get to questions. There's some stuff sitting on your table. I'm going to show you. The first one is this infographic. By the way, you can find this on our website as well at voteohio.gov/secure. Now, if you have Uncle Norm in your family who believes that there is a secret algorithm in the voting machine controlled by the Venezuelans changing your vote from candidate 1 to candidate 2, please share this with that individual. If you yourself have come to believe things that are not true about elections, read this over and learn more about the process. There's a lot more than I could go into in this few minutes of remarks, but this talks about the security protocols that we have in place. But here's another opportunity. If you want to learn for yourself, if you don't want to trust what I put on this paper, you can sign up to be one of the 35,000 Ohioans that it takes to run Election Day. This is the poll worker recruiter card. Has anybody ever worked as an Election Day poll worker? All right, look at that civic participation from the Rotary Club. That's awesome. If you haven't, consider it. It's a long day. It is not a lot of pay. So I'm not selling you on it very much, am I here? All right, it's a long day. It's not a lot of pay, but it is a really rewarding experience in a couple ways. You'll learn how elections are really run. You will go home at 7:45, 8 o'clock, 8:45 that night, and you will watch the results scroll up across the bottom of your screen, and you'll have the confidence of knowing, I was part of the team that delivered that. You'll notice on our I voted sticker, and that was redesigned by my administration. It was a high school girl from Circleville that designed it. It says, I voted. It also says Ohio voted. What I love about that is that it really encapsulates that this is both an individual responsibility and also something that we do corporately, collectively, as a group of citizens. And that individual responsibility, along with the community spirit of voting, is reflected right there in our I voted sticker. So I hope you'll consider signing up to be a poll worker. By the way, if you have employees, I know many of you do, consider giving them a free day off to be a poll worker. I know that's a sacrifice. It's hard enough to find employees already, but consider giving your employees a day off. Some companies call it CTO, civic time off, like you would give a military reservist time off to do their military obligation because the law requires you to. Consider giving your employees a day off to be a poll worker if that's what they want to do. And by the way, if you have a 17-year-old in your family, 17-year-old high school students can be poll workers. Yes, a year before you're able to be a voter, you can be an election official. It's a great thing to put on a college application. It's a great thing to put on a job application. It shows a level of civic engagement that most 17-year-olds can't demonstrate. This gives them a chance to do that. So please take this and share this. Again, the place to sign up is on our website, voteohio.gov. The next election is less than 100 days away. You can see that we take a lot of pride in this. And I'll end with this. The ability for free men and women to select their leaders is a truly rare thing. If you think about it, for the tens and tens of thousands of years that humans have occupied this rock, There have not been a chance for people to choose who their leaders are. For most of human history, who's in charge was worked out either through force or through heredity. You had to be the son of the old man in charge and wait for him to die, and then you got to be the one in charge. Or through force, you get a bunch of people on horseback and go kill the guy in charge, and then you got to be the guy in charge. Thank God in the last roughly 200 years, we've come up with a better way to do it. It's just up to us to embrace that because it truly does make a difference. And of course, right now in the first month of a new presidential administration, we all think a lot about who lives at the White House, and as an Army reservist, who is my commander-in-chief? That matters a lot to me. But what matters more than who lives at the White House on a day-to-day basis in your daily life is probably who works at the courthouse, who works at the schoolhouse, who works at the State House, at City Hall. And in years like 2025, when we have these local elections, it makes a huge difference. So please don't miss out on the opportunity to make your voice heard. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you all have for me. Thank you so much. I should introduce AJ, this guy who's walking back here. He's our regional liaison. He's at Northwest Ohio when I can't be, and so he covers us here. Who's got a question for me?
A reminder, the microphone's here. Please pass it to the next person.
Thanks, Father.
You were here first.
Guilty as charged. Hello, thank you. I have a question about what we used to call Golden Week.
Yes.
You know, you think about this notion of making it easy and convenient, but safe and secure, and there's a tension there, as you obviously articulated. I'm curious if Golden Week, for those in the room who may not know, it's a week where early voting overlapped with the registration to vote period, just for context. If eliminating Golden Week was in service of your goal, easy, convenient, safe and secure, I'm curious why. What is it about the Golden Week that made it, I would assume, less secure, because the assumption is it makes it more convenient. But if it did do that, what would need to change for it to come back so you could still hit your goal? Thank you.
Thanks for the question. And so, like with many things, the responsibility that we have as public officials is to maintain the right balance, right? If something tips too far towards the, if it makes it really convenient, but it also creates a vulnerability, then that's something that we need to respond to. And when the legislature created early voting in 2005 in Ohio, this was done unintentionally. When they passed that, they said that early voting would start 35 days before the election. And the voter registration deadline in Ohio is 30 days. So you got to be registered to vote 30 days before you vote. The intention when the legislature passed that was if you participated in early voting, that you will have had to have been registered 30 days before you actually cast your ballot. A court interpreted it differently. And they said when you're participating in early voting, you're submitting your ballot, but it's not actually cast until Election Day. And so based on that somewhat pretzel logic, they said that if you are registered to vote 30 days before Election Day, that you can vote anytime during the early voting period. And what it did is unintentionally created that thing called Golden Week. The reason I say unintentional is that it wasn't ever set up that way in the first place. So the boards of elections weren't exactly ready for that, and the law in place was not exactly ready to accommodate that. So what it ended up with is I could walk into a board of elections during that period, and I could say, my name is Bob Buckeye, and I live at 123 Any Street, Anytown, Ohio. Here's my voter registration form. Now give me a ballot. And they wouldn't have the time that it would take to check and make sure that I'm not also registered in another county. They would not have the time to make sure that's a real address. They would not have the time to check and make sure, a whole lot of things that we do, that I'm a citizen, for example. And so it created this friction where the speed of that process occurring right there at the counter in real time was not consistent with the kind of safeguards that we wanted to have in place. The Ohio Association of Elections Officials, the bipartisan group that represents our boards of elections, was in favor of eliminating that, as well as a lot of Ohioans on both sides of the aisle, and that's why we did that. That happened, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, when I was in the state legislature. In order to bring it back, and I'm not proposing this, but in order to bring it back, you would have to have in place something like what New Hampshire has. New Hampshire has same-day voter registration. If you walk into a polling place in New Hampshire, the line bifurcates. And if you're registered to vote, you go in and you vote. If you're not registered to vote, you go into a separate line. You get a number, like at the deli counter, and you submit your registration form. And then 30 minutes later, they'll call your number after they had the time to check and make sure you're a citizen, to check and make sure you're not registered in another county, to make sure that's a real address and not a vacant lot, all those kind of things. And then they will say, number 56, and then you'll come up and be able to cast your ballot. Ohio doesn't have that process in place. We don't really have the mechanisms to carry out that process, and that's one of the reasons why we don't have same-day registration. But again, as long as you have the wherewithal and the foresight to get registered to vote 30 days before the election, you're not going to have any problem casting your ballot. Next question.
What role, if any, does the Secretary of State have with the Federal Corporate Transparency Act?
So my role with that is trying to keep people informed about it. Most people may not know about this, but this thing called the Corporate Transparency Act is also known as the Beneficial Ownership Information, or BOI requirement. And so the federal government 4.5 years ago, under international pressure, passed a thing that would require you to disclose a lot of information connecting the individual, the individual natural person with your LLC or S Corp corporation, and so required to disclose all of this. And the rationale behind all of that was anti-money laundering, as though, Bob was going to be using his cafe as a front for a massive international money laundering scheme. I think it's a bit far-fetched, but we fought that, we as a group, the National Association of Secretaries of State, because in the first iteration of this, they wanted us to collect that information. We said, no, sir, I'm not going to ask, hundreds of thousands of Ohio businesses to report to me this information that I really don't need to be the repository of. And so what the federal government did is put it in an agency called FinCEN, and has required that all this information be disclosed on their website. The original deadline was a month ago, January 1st or December 31st, the end of the year, New Year's, and you were required to file all this information. If you didn't, you were going to have fines and fees and possible jail time, pretty onerous penalty structure. There have been lawsuits. I've been opposing this from the beginning. I've been working with a member of the Congress from down south of here named Warren Davidson to try to get it repealed. It has not been repealed by Congress, but it has currently been sort of paused by the courts. And so what my role has been is to make sure that at least businesses know about it. And so if you want more information, ohiosos.gov on our website. I have an LLC. I took the 20 minutes to fill out some information because I wanted to sort of test fire the thing and see how it worked, but it wasn't all that inconvenient. But there's a question of, should the federal government be asking you for all that information in the first place? And again, we don't know what the courts are going to do, but I am preparing an amicus brief for that case, speaking out against it and asking the courts to strike it down. Just another sort of big government, government overreach, in my opinion. Yep.
I'm really happy to hear about the 17-year-old situation where they can come and work the polls. I have been a poll worker before, and although it is a very long day, it's very beneficial and rewarding. I have a two-part question regarding the younger generation. First, what percentage of younger voters does Ohio have compared to maybe the national average? And secondly, what are you guys doing at the Secretary of State to try and pull in younger voters?
Yeah. So I know that we are on par with what most other states have. I've not looked at the numbers lately, and quite candidly, it varies by election, right? The biggest determinant of turnout is how excited people are about the election. And again, if you have, even in a year like 2025, it's all over the board. So in like one town where there's a competitive mayor's race and people are really excited about it, you may have really high turnout. And the next town where there's not a very competitive mayor's race because it's been the same person for 30 years or whatever else, you may have next to no turnout. So the biggest determining factor is how excited people are. Same thing with presidential races and that kind of thing. All the way down the ticket, it's how excited people are. The work that we've done to try to engage young people is multifaceted. It starts with a thing that we have called Youth at the Booth, which is that poll worker recruiting thing. It's a great way to get young people involved early on. We've gone out to high schools and run mock elections. Schools vote on things. They vote on who's the class president or what the theme for the prom is going to be. And so we've had the boards of elections come out and set up real voting machines. and let them vote on the real voting machines. And invariably, the kids walk out of the lunchroom and they say, well, that was easy. And then we'll grab them in the hallway and say, next year, instead of class president, you can vote for U.S. president. Isn't that cool? And so that's been one way that we've engaged them. We also send out every year to every graduating high school senior a thing called the Grads Vote Packet. And again, we have to rely on the schools to actually pass these out with the diplomas, and most of them do. But every graduating high school senior, about 150,000 of them every year, get a Grads Vote Packet with a little QR code. If you want to scan it with your phone, takes you right to the voter registration page, or the paper form if you want to fill out the hard copy voter registration form, and that yields some pretty good results. And then, again, our media engagement, social media, working with a lot of social studies and civics teachers, because often they're the ones. And then, word of mouth like this. Each one of you has a person in your life who is 18 or will turn 18 or just turned 18. And most of you, if you remember back when you first registered to vote, it probably wasn't something you came up with. Somebody probably encouraged you to do it, right? If you're honest about this. When you were 18, 19, 20 years old and you finally got registered to vote, somebody probably encouraged you to do it. Now it's your turn to do that for a young person in your life, and then to remind them how important it is to participate. We've also made overseas military voting much easier. That was really how I first got involved in voting. I still serve as a reservist and have been in the Army since I was 18 years old, basically, and so that's one that's really important to me, because that's a population that sometimes struggles with staying connected to the civic life of their home state. Yes, sir.
This last year, the Ohio League of Women Voters spent a lot of time and money out getting petitions to get issue 1 on the ballot, with the sense that the districting in the state of Ohio is very, I don't want to use the term rigged, but disproportionate. And I'd like to know what your thought is and how can we make it better?
Yeah. My
My vote where I live is, I'm in this really snaky district, the snake along the lake or whatever they call it,
Well, that was the last decade's set of districts that was the case.
But it's a big issue, because my vote means a heck of a lot less than it did if I was where I was previously in Wood County.
Yeah. So first of all, let's think about redistricting in totality. Everybody know the term gerrymandering? It's actually a mispronunciation. It should be gerrymandering, and it started in 1812 when the Massachusetts Boston newspaper was poking fun at Governor Elbridge Gerry because he drew a salamander-shaped district to help his party, the Whig Party, win more seats in their state senate. And so since 1812, we've been talking about this, and guess what? It's almost always going to be a little bit in the eye of the beholder, right? Whichever party gets some marginal benefit from the process is going to think it's a really virtuous process. And whichever party loses some marginal, benefit in the process is going to think it's terrible and rigged and gerrymandered. It's kind of like one of those things that's like an ink blot test, right? So when the city of Cleveland, which was dominated by Democrats, drew new city council districts a couple months ago, people thought those were fabulous if they were Democrats. If they were Republicans, they hated them. Those same people probably had an opposite view of the way that state legislative districts and state and congressional districts were drawn at the state level. The best scenario in my mind is one that puts Democrats and Republicans at a table and forces a bit of statesmanship by putting sort of a sword of Damocles above their head and forcing them to come together and compromise. Because compromise is not a failure. It's how statesmen and women solve problems. And there's never going to be a set of district lines that everybody thinks is perfect. But what I would like to focus on is, first of all, compactness, keeping communities of interest together, and competitiveness. I think competition makes us stronger. It works that way in the free market. It works that way on the athletic field. It works that way in politics. I like to see competitive districts where Democrats and Republicans have to go out there and put their best foot forward, work really hard, knock on a lot of doors, speak at a lot of Rotary clubs, and hopefully, win the support of their constituents. The process that was amended in Ohio's Constitution 6 years ago is a big improvement. Evidently, there's some people that think it should go even further. I'm open to that idea, but what we don't want to do is constantly change up the rules, because that creates confusion, and we also don't want to have mid-decennial redistricting. The redistricting is supposed to happen every 10 years, and just because one party thinks that they can get another seat or lose another seat or whatever else is not a reason to start drawing lines mid-decade, because that's confusing for voters as well. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your commentary thus far, Mr. Secretary. As a U.S. Marine, Desert Storm veteran, I appreciate your service. Hoorah.
Yeah, I know. In the Army, we say hua. Semper Fi to you either way, brother.
Hoorah. So my question is based on transparency. Sometimes transparency isn't so transparent. So I go to pull petitions for the office, and I'm told that the name on the ballot can be different than the name you have on the petition. And so Roberto, they said it could be Bob, it could be Robert, it could be any other name. So I said to the worker, okay, so does the name on the petition have to be consistent with that which is going to be on the ballot? And they said, I can't tell you that. I said, what do you mean you can't tell me that? I said, you just told me I could use this name here. Can I not use this name here? She goes, I can't answer that. And I said, well, who do I ask? And she goes, you're going to have to go to the Secretary of State.
You found him.
So I'd like to go back to that worker and say, I spoke to the Secretary of State, and this is what he said. So is there a rationale for that, and why is it that they have certain restrictions on the assistance that they can offer?
So first, the disclaimer, right? I am not a lawyer, which certainly means that I'm not your lawyer. So for binding legal advice for your campaign, you should talk to a campaign lawyer, talk to your party if you're a member of a party. Oftentimes, that assistance does come from the parties. The County Republican Party should help the Republican candidates with ballot access. The County Democratic Party should help the Democratic candidates with ballot access. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. I understand, because maybe you're not an incumbent and you're running against the party's chosen person. And so there are lawyers that specialize in this. This is also an area that gets litigated constantly. And it's unfortunate that people sort of constantly run to the courthouse as it relates to election law, but I get sued like 3 or 4 times a month. I get sued a lot by all kinds of people. And it's a weird thing, as like an Eagle Scout and a guy that's had a security clearance since I was 20 years old, to see my name as the defendant on a lot of lawsuits, but it's because people are trying to tweak the rules or change the rules or whatever else. The law as it relates to your petitions are that it's got to be your voter registration name, how you're registered to vote. When people go to put their name on the ballot, once they achieve enough signatures, once you get enough signatures that you have gotten ballot access, you are asked by the Board of Elections, what do you want the name to say on the ballot? Because I'm Frank J. LaRose Jr. I don't want to put Jr. on there because it makes it sound like I'm 15, right? So I just run as Frank LaRose. Some people like to put their middle initial. Some people like to use a more familiar term like Bobby when their name is actually Robert, because everybody knows him as Bobby, but they didn't register to vote as Bobby. They registered as Robert Smith, but everybody knows him as Bobby Smith, so they're going to put that on the ballot. That's why there's those kinds of variations. As it relates to the sort of abrupt customer service that you got at the counter from the Board of Elections, they are, like most folks in elections, a little bit leery of being sued by people as well. And so I can say that in recent years, really going back to my predecessor about 10 years ago, boards of elections have stopped dispensing much advice over the counter because that has come back to bite them, where somebody would say, well, at the Board of Elections, I was told this, so I'm going to sue the Board of Elections, and then it gets real messy. And so they've gotten a little bit too cautious, in my opinion. What I've told the boards is that they can give friendly advice, they can't give legal advice. And I hope that they would stick to that. There's also a candidate guide on our website that goes through in excruciating detail all of these things, including code citations and that kind of thing. And again, you can find that on our website, voteohio.gov. As you know, there has been recent litigation as it relates to candidates who changed their name. And that has been an issue for some folks, so we've tried to increase the sort of information about that to make sure people know if you have legally changed your name in the last few years, you have to put both your old name and your new name on the petition. So there's no perfect way to go about this, but we do try to be as helpful as you can. If you ever have any, as we can, if you ever have any questions, our phone number is 877-SOS-OHIO. 877-SOS-OHIO, or you can just shoot me an email, frank@ohiosos.gov, and we'll get somebody in our legal team to try to give you an answer. All right? Yes, sir.
Hey, thank you, Frank. And I will introduce myself as Ron Wells Jr. I'm a junior too.
Yeah, there you go.
You touched on this a little bit. Election misinformation and denialism continues to be an issue, right? We look at what's happening in North Carolina with their, legal battle with their judges over voter eligibility. You see what's going on in Georgia with the recent legislation allowing individuals to contest eligibility of voters. So what is your office doing to combat this message of misinformation and disinformation? And I appreciate the infographic, but from one government employee to another, it's trust in government in general is lower right now. How are you working with the business community to spread this message that our elections are safe and fair and accurate? So one, what is your office doing? How are you working with other communities to combat misinformation and disinformation?
I would argue also that trust in institutions is at an all-time low. By the way, it's not just government, it's the media, it's business, it's nonprofits. There's just a trust deficit, if you will, and trust is something that's not given, it's earned, right? So what you're talking about includes this could be a whole separate speech. So I'll try to truncate it as much as I can. First of all, it is a good thing. It is a good thing that we as the public are a little skeptical, right? Don't just sort of trust everything that we're told. It's a good thing that we are emotionally involved in our elections. I've been to like 38 countries, including a lot of places you probably wouldn't want to go. And I've seen people vote for the first time in countries like Iraq and in Kosovo. And in a lot of countries, and I've done election observation. I was there, I observed the election in Ukraine when Vladimir Zelensky was elected. I was part of the American delegation there observing that election. I've observed elections 2 years ago in Nigeria. A lot of these countries you go to, people don't get too hyped about voter rights, and they don't get too hyped about election integrity because they don't have much faith that it's going to change anything anyway, right? The good news is, as Americans, it's right here. We care about this stuff. We care about voter rights viscerally. We care about election integrity viscerally. We care about this stuff because we know what a difference it makes, right? The unfortunate thing is sometimes politicians will exploit that because they know that if somebody's motivated and cares about something, that's a good way to get people hyped up to come to the rally or to push the donate button or to vote for them or knock on doors, whatever it may be. And so it happens candidly on both sides of the aisle. You'll see people saying that voter suppression is rampant and widespread, so elect me and I'll make it stop. When in reality, voter suppression is less now than it's ever been in our nation's history. You'll see people say that voter fraud is at an all-time high and people are cheating and there's fake ballots and secret algorithms and all this. And in reality, that's not true either, right? We've seen prominent Democrats and prominent Republicans that have engaged in election denialism, right? And this is something that is your responsibility to decide what that person is saying and do they have the information behind it. We're all responsible for doing our own research and making our own decisions. I can say what my office does is both proactive and reactive. On the proactive side, we attempt to flood the zone with accurate information. I'll give you an example. We required all the boards of elections to transition to a .gov domain so that we can say, make sure you're getting your election information from a trustworthy source. If it's not a .gov website, then who knows who it is, right? The .gov means it's an official government website, which is responsible for making sure that that information is accurate. Your county board of elections, the Ohio Secretary of State website. We've worked to make sure that we engage with the media and answer questions and get accurate information out there through social media and through the publications that we do and through speaking to Rotary clubs and hundreds of other locations around the state. That's the proactive side. The reactive side is when in certain times things pop up that need to be combated, right? I'll give you 2 examples from recent times. We have seen this ugly reality that oftentimes it is minority communities that are targeted for election disinformation, right? And it's oftentimes done because there's an existing friction and somebody thinks, well, I can just, inflame that friction to try to get a political outcome. So we started working with minority community leaders all throughout the state way back in 2019, meeting with members of the NAACP, the clergy, A. Philip Randolph Institute, many others, and we did disinformation workshops to understand or recognize disinformation, and then how do you combat it, what do you do about it, and building those relationships. As a result, in 2020, when this ugly, really racist robocall went out, this auto dial, and it went out specifically in the Cleveland area, also up in Detroit, telling people that if you vote early, that the police can use that to find you and serve an arrest warrant. Or if you vote early, creditors can use that to find you and track you down to make you pay past due debts. Ugly stuff. A lie, right? But within 30 seconds of that robocall going out, I had a number of people that had been part of our workshop that heard it, that recorded it, and texted it to me. We launched an investigation involving local, state, and federal officials, and the bad guys got arrested. Right? And so that's an example of things working. Another thing is on social media. We set up a war room operation, and this goes back to my military background, where we monitor stuff on election day and in the lead up to election day, right? Because where you're going to find out about something going wrong is on X or on Instagram or on TikTok or wherever else. And so we've started monitoring that stuff, and what we found is examples of people spreading false information, sometimes just because they want to try to make themselves famous and get followers, right? Other times it's even more malicious than that. We had an example of in 2022, somebody posted a photo of a burning box truck. And they said, I am a Cincinnati, Hamilton County election official. This is my truck full of ballots. It's on fire on the side of the road. I wonder if your ballot's in there. Ha ha, this is funny. I'm going to go viral. Well, we didn't think it was funny. And so we did a reverse image search of that, and we realized it was just a stock photo of a traffic accident from Texas from a decade ago. It had nothing to do with elections, had nothing to do with Ohio. It was just an internet prankster. And so we were able to take that and watermark it, debunked, and put it back out there and share it with members of the media. Another example, we had a car ram a polling location in Miami County in 2020. What's the first thing anybody thinks of? A car rams a polling location. Politically motivated violence. It's an act of terrorism. No, it was an elderly driver who mistook the gas pedal for the brake pedal. We were on the phone with the county sheriff's deputy who was on his way to the scene, and within 10 minutes, we knew exactly what was going on. And so we sent out a press release to like 200 members of the media saying, this has happened, nobody is hurt, this is what caused it, everything's fine, and voting will continue at this polling location. What did we do? We may have circumvented the, breaking news alert, car rams polling location in Ohio, crew's on its way right now to see, and then unleashed all kinds of public anxiety. Another example is a alleged student at Ohio State said, I'm the resident hall aide who sorts the mail, and I know which one of the students is a Democrat and which one's a Republican, and I throw away the ballots for the ones that don't vote for my party. Well, we found out that that has nothing to do with the way that Ohio State sorts mail, and we were able to get that information out to people. So those are some of the things that we do. Those are just a few of dozens of examples where we saw false information starting to become viral. We circumvented it to make sure that people were empowered with the accurate information. It's sometimes like a game of whack-a-mole. It's not perfect, but again, through both reactive, batting things down like that, and proactive, flooding the zone with accurate information, we believe that we're doing a better job than most other states in the nation with making sure that Ohioans know the facts about voting in our state. So, yes, sir.
Frank, thank you, and thanks for coming to the largest Rotary Club in Ohio.
There you go.
Just curious, what's the rough percentage of independent voters in Ohio, and how has that trended? And then what's the split of the rest? And the second part, are there states that allow online voting, and do you think online voting becomes prevalent anytime soon in the U.S.?
So I'll start with the last one first. There really aren't, with a few exceptions. I know a state of West Virginia and a couple others have piloted programs for remote electronic voting for military members. But even that is in a highly controlled environment where the soldier has to certify that they are who they say they are with their ID, and that an officer on the other end certifies that they are who they say they are, and it's a secure connection and that kind of thing. So it's a rare thing in a highly controlled environment, but not sort of out in the wild where anybody can do it. And the reason for that is when you make any innovation in voting, you need two things. You need competence and you need confidence. Now, I know that's an alliteration, so let me explain. You need competence, the technological competence to do it correctly. And that will exist if it doesn't already, through blockchain and advanced technology and biometric identification and all kinds of things that we can do to make sure that the person holding the iPhone or the person sitting at the laptop is actually who they say they are, and then encrypt that information, transmit it to the Board of Elections, sever the identity from the voter, right? Because we want to have a secret ballot. You don't want some government official to be able to know how you voted. And so if you think about it, the technology of that, it's more complicated than people realize. You need to establish the identity of the voter beyond a reasonable doubt, or beyond, with a 100% confidence, and then you need to sever the identity when the ballot is submitted so that you can have a secret ballot, and you need to make sure that it was transmitted faithfully and received and all that. So that's the competence. And then again, we can get there. The part that will always lag decades behind is the confidence, the public confidence that I can trust this thing and that it works. And that's why I predict that it'll be a very long time, maybe not in my lifetime, maybe in my lifetime, a very long time before you will see people doing remote electronic voting, because the technological competence will be there long before the public confidence to trust the thing. And something like the foundation of our entire government, the way of life, the consent of the governed that our founders talked about, which is what establishes all power that any public official has, you can't take chances with that. And that public confidence will be a hard thing to build in something that's a bunch of ones and zeros zinging around the internet that nobody can see. And that's a difficult thing. The first part, a question about independence. So in Ohio, we don't really have independence. We have unaffiliated. This seems like just like a legalistic thing, but you register as a member of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party by voting in those parties' primaries. And so I'll run into people that'll say, I'm a Republican. I've been a Republican since I voted for, who knows, way back decades ago. But if you never vote in the spring primary, you're not actually a registered Republican, right? And so if you don't vote in the primary, you're listed as unaffiliated. And so the largest block of voters in Ohio by order of 2-to-1 is those unaffiliated. But many of them may be lifelong Republican voters, never voted for a Democrat, lifelong Democratic voters, never voted for a Republican, but in the voter registration roll, they show up as unaffiliated. So the number doesn't really mean all that much, quite honestly. Now, I will say this, and this is factually accurate, that the Republican Party surpassed in the last 4 years the Democratic Party in the total number of registrations in the state of Ohio. And again, that doesn't really mean all that much, because that's only people that vote in the spring that are listed on that list. So, all right. Well, hey, thank you so much, everybody. God bless. Give you your mic back, Father.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In appreciation, we want to give you a book that was written by one of our past members, Historical Tales of Toledo. And we'll also make a donation to Rotary International to help eradicate polio. Wonderful. In your name.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Real quickly, we have a visiting Rotarian here who wanted to say a word. Jennifer Gilray? There she is. Come on up here. A word, short.
We'll make it quick. I'm Jenny Gilroy with the Archbold Rotary. This is Jay Salgo with the Archbold Rotary. And Kevin, a few months ago, had said, if you ever have a fundraiser come in, there might have been a few drinks involved. So I took him up on his offer. So Jay's going to talk a little bit about our fundraiser that we're doing.
Yeah, just thank you for the opportunity to be here today. A beautiful location, a little different than ours. We actually meet in a barn, but it is a restaurant barn. It is not like the barn, but if anyone wants to come, we'd be more than happy to have anyone join us. We meet on Wednesdays, Fridays. We switched it. Well, anyway, what we're here for is we're doing a fundraiser within our campaign. I took on the chair of the fundraising committee Our past activities got a little stagnant. We've got some new membership, and we're trying to make it exciting. And if you're like me and you're a Cleveland Browns fan, your football season is over. So we tried to do a Super Bowl. Many of you are familiar with it, Super Bowl squares, where you have a 10 by 10 graph, randomized scores on the side and top, and based on where the Eagles or Chiefs are score at the end of each quarter, you will do a payout. So our payouts will be $200 for the first quarter, halftime, third quarter, and then $400 for the final score. If there is overtime, it is the final score that counts. So we wanted to come share that opportunity. We would be more than happy to have anybody contribute. And the way I look at it is, if anyone is familiar with FanDuel or any of the online betting ones, at least when you lose this way, it goes towards a good cause. So we'd be happy to have anyone enroll if you want. We'll just hang out over here. We're at the table here on the left if anyone would like to participate and have a chance to win some money. All the proceeds do go back to our local causes, which are scholarships primarily for the local school district, which I always also represent. So thank you all.
Thank you. So we have some great programs coming up. On the 10th, we have Lifting Black Voices, a panel discussion. No meeting on the 17th, President's Day. And on the 24th, we have the Bayers Avalon Foundation Rare Disease panel discussion. There are no meetings today, but the Environmental Committee will meet this Wednesday at 12 noon at Lot. And of course, you are always able to sign up for committees 7 minutes after, but we're adjourned.